Please turn up the volume for this. We are learning new details about the scope of work the president's fixer, Michael Cohen, was hired to do for at&t with that $600,000 deal. The Washington Post obtained internal documents that say Cohen would, quote, focus on specific long-term planning initiatives, as well as the immediate issue of corporate tax reform and the acquisition of Time Warner. Rosalind Helderman joins me now to discuss. She's a political reporter for the Washington Post who co-wrote that piece. Rosalind, lay out the details of the reporting, because there's one thing to say you're a business consultant who's going to help you. Me being Michael Cohen, I'm a business consultant. I'm going to help at&t understand how Trump works. And it's another thing to say, pay me and I'm going to help you push this deal through.
Right. So since we first learned earlier this week that major corporations were paying big bucks to Michael Cohen, kind of the big question was sort of why? What did they think they were going to get from the president's personal attorney? And here we are in these documents from at&t getting some really strong insight into exactly what at&t wanted. You know, that Time Warner merger is an $85 billion deal. It was announced shortly before the election, and Donald Trump had gone out on the campaign trail and said that he was opposed to it, that it was too much power concentrated in the hands of too few people. So when he was elected, at&t had a real problem. And so maybe it's not surprising that they decided to go out and throw money, in this case $600,000, not a small chunk of change, at people in Donald Trump's world who they thought could help them with this. Now, we should say it does not seem to have worked. Trump's Justice Department filed suit to block the merger in November of last year.
Okay, it's not a small amount of change, but it actually is, if you put into context the kind of money these corporations have to spend. They blow their nose and have to pay lawyers $600 grand. So we just should put that into context. And we should note that at&t declined to comment on the documents, but they did not challenge the authenticity. And Cohen's lawyer declined to comment, and Cohen did not respond to requests. I also want to ask, what kind of insight could Michael Cohen offer to at&t? Because according to the contract, it says he was there to provide insights into understanding the new administration. I kind of think that's actually a fair statement. He can do that. He's worked with Trump forever.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he does understand Donald Trump, the mind of Donald Trump, who is an unpredictable executive. He knows the people around him. What he could not do, which was sort of envisioned in the contract, I would imagine, would be to provide sort of advice on this complicated sort of regulatory matters. It also said he was going to work on issues in front of the FCC. You know, this is a guy who had done real estate law. He had been involved with running taxi cabs. You know, where he would get the expertise to do not just this contract, but the one he had from Novartis, which was supposed to be for healthcare policy, the one he had from a Korean company that was supposed to provide legal advice about accounting standards. That's a little hard to understand.
Hard to understand. Rosalind, this is a great piece. I want to point out Reuters is reporting a statement from at&t CEO Randall Stephenson. He reportedly tells staff in the new memo that hiring Michael Cohen was a big mistake, but the company did not break the law. Stephenson also says the company's head of external and legislative affairs is retiring. We had a feeling that might happen. Jason, Ron, I want you to weigh in. Ron, you and I both know, and it might be a sleazy business, a fringe business, business consultants exist all over the place. Selling access to, whether it's hedge funds that are hard to get into, companies, deals. You know this to be true.
Well, I ran a fund of funds.
There you go. Yeah. Is the issue here, Michael Cohen takes the money in. Does he pay taxes on it? What does he do with the money? In some way, does that money make its way to President Trump?
So he's not a registered lobbyist to start with. So that.
But you have to be a registered lobbyist if what you're selling is just, I'm here to help you understand Trump.
Given the questions that you asked, let me suggest that Donald Trump has found his BB Rebozo. And if you're not old enough to remember that reference, he was a financial advisor and real estate expert who counseled Richard Nixon and who was investigated for taking allegedly illegal payments that may have been funneled to the president at that time. So I think there is some precedent, again, going back to the Watergate years, about potentially untoward relations between a close advisor to the president and where money ends up. And you've also heard other reporters talk about some of these monies going to Michael Cohen as being potential slush fund accounts to pay off Stormy Daniels. how these funds were commingled, what the
Right.
uses and ultimate uses of these funds were, is still an open question. So I think there's probably a bigger story here, and it's not just as simple as Michael Cohen providing advice to companies on topics, as was just said, are probably somewhat foreign to him in terms of M&A, merger and acquisition counseling, healthcare policy, FCC regulation, Department of Justice concerns, and the like.
I mean, he likes the comparison to Ray Donovan. I'm not sure that Ray Donovan is an expert on healthcare policy or mergers and acquisitions.
Nor was Bibi Rebozo.
Rudy Giuliani has said the president was unaware of this. The president is not involved in any respect. It's a dead issue as far as I'm concerned.
That's what Rudy's going to say, right? Now that he's spending his full time in defending the president. I wouldn't say it's Ray Donovan. I'd say it's more Don Cheadle, House of Lies, right? Like he puts himself out there. I know everybody. I can do this for you. And really, he's just trying to rack up fees. The issue that I see from a government standpoint.
Sleazy, but okay.
Yes, exactly. Here's the catch, though. If he was just being paid for what he said, which is we're going to pay you $600,000, come talk to us, it's fine. But if he was calling members of the administration, if he was calling senators or members of Congress, that's where it becomes lobbying. That's where he could get flipped. That's where he could be in some sorts of legal trouble. And I have difficulty believing anyone's going to pay Michael Cohen $600,000 or all the amounts of money he was paid, and he wasn't making any phone calls to anybody in the administration.
Particularly this administration, or President Trump more specifically, opposes the at&t Time Warner deal,
right.
At least as far as some people suggest, for very specific reasons. He is not a fan of CNN. He has suggested, some have suggested, that if the deal went through, Time Warner would be forced to divest the network. There are a whole host of issues around this. And so what will Michael Cohen do? Can he get the president to change his mind about this? There is no legal precedent to oppose this merger, a vertical merger of this sort, where you have a distributor buying a content company. Comcast did the same with NBC Universal, has been something that's been approved by governments for quite some time. Vertical integrations are not illegal, and yet the president opposes them on potentially other grounds.
Well, we are going to, well, at some point we may find out what Michael Cohen did with the money. Remember, he's a guy who records everything, and I'm pretty sure Robert Mueller has that information. I want to talk Giuliani for a moment. Giuliani has now officially left his law firm. I've spoken to people in the last day, very close to senior partners at the law firm, and they said among a lot of reasons why Rudy left was when lawyers go down to Washington, they still are representing their firms,
yes.
Which mean their firms are getting paid for it. Rudy Giuliani goes on leave of absence. He takes all of the money for himself. The firm gets none of the money, but they have to weather the storm of reputational risk, and the partners don't get to weigh in on what Rudy is going to do. So they've got all the downside, none of the upside. And as they're heading into their annual meeting in Vegas for the next 3 days, the only thing anyone's talking about is Rudy, 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 and it made no sense for them to continue.
No law firm in this country would reasonably want to be associated with this administration.
No, that's not true.
Well,
that's not true. And the law firm's not saying that either. The law firm is not saying they don't want him to take the job because they take issue with President Trump. They don't want him to take the job because they're not involved in the conversation and they're not getting paid.
But if Rudy Giuliani continues to say the kinds of things that he said last week, and he continues to make sort of an embarrassment of himself in defending inappropriate behavior on the part of the president, then they don't want to be associated with it. Look, anyone wants to take a paycheck from President Trump, and if you end up getting him off, you're going to look like a hero. But if you've got somebody out there running rogue, and like you said, you're not making any money from it, but he's making you look like an idiot, no, I wouldn't want my law firm associated with that, and nobody smart would.
And I think they've taken issue with some of the things that Mayor Giuliani has said with respect to that this was routine practice for a lawyer to pay off a possible
That's a great
individual
point.
who was
when he
causing
said how the
problems.
money was funneled, and he said funneled like it was no
Well,
biggie.
he also suggested that this could be done without the client's knowledge or participation, which the law firm came back and said, no, that's not the case. That is not our standard business practice.
And that's not New York law.
And they've had lawyers in their firm in the past who have faced some similar difficulties, and so they probably do not want to go through a repeat experience again.
Well, now they're not going to have to. Rudy, he's on his own. Coming up, top automakers